Bai Tanxia, who was secretly married for her love, discovered that she had fed her dog for 3 years of her youth. After the other parties Bai Yueguang returned to China, she chose to divorce with dignity. However, half an hour before the divorce, a car accident turned her into a little fool. From that day on, Mr. Song had an extra little coquettish spirit and a little crying bag by his side. "Don't leave me behind, my husband. I want to go to the company with him. My husband fell and I need to hug him to get up. How about we take a walk together, husband? Why do we have to sleep in separate rooms, husband? I need to sleep with my husband." Mr. Song gradually lost himself amidst the sweet and greasy sounds of his husband, preparing to reform and grow old together with his beloved wife. However, Bai Tanxia regained her memories. She said, "Divorce, I'll only give you 2 hours." After his divorce, Mr. Song finally realized that his petite wife, who was secretly nurtured by the Bai family, had an outstanding figure in flower gun dancing. Mr. Song begged for reconciliation every day, but his mother-in-law became annoyed and brought a group of people to his door, throwing 100 million yuan in the face. "Get lost, stay away from my daughter." Before, there was a white moonlight. White sandalwood Xia was able to marry Song Qinian, and that was when the ancestral tomb emitted green smoke. Later, everyone said, "Did the Song Qinian family burn high incense on their ancestral graves?" Surprisingly able to marry the only daughter of the Bai family. Keywords of the novel. Abandoned wives and mothers of wealthy families who are not good wives and mothers after divorce. No pop-ups, abandoned wives and mothers of wealthy families who are not good wives and mothers after divorce. Complete download of TXT. Latest chapters for reading. Abandoned wives and mothers of wealthy families who are not good wives and mothers after divorce. Chapter 1. Let's Divorce. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Let's Divorce, Let's Get Divorced. Song Qinian could never have imagined that this sentence would come from his always gentle and virtuous, gentle and easy-going, considerate, petite and charming, with his heart and eyes filled with words spoken by his wife. He even had to suspect that he might have gotten angry today and had hallucinations. "What drove you crazy all morning, Bai Tanxia?" He couldn't help but feel a little restless in his heart. Bai Tanxia looked at his empty fingers, suppressed discomfort, choked up for a moment, and her gentle voice carried a hint of forced coldness. "Anyway, you married me just to get rid of your mother's control. Now that you're in power, you don't need me anymore." Song Qinian only felt a cloud of depression in his chest. What kind of stimulation did she experience today, and how did she feel like a different person? "Knowing that I like quietness, I used to speak to him in a gentle and measured manner. Is this a sign of being possessed by evil today? If you don't divorce me, is it difficult? Are you in love with me?" Bai Tanxia sneered at Song Qinian and asked. "Who is Song Qinian?" He was rebellious, only fond of playing. If it weren't for fighting against his mother, how could he have married a decoration back then? It's even less likely to fall in love with her. His eyebrows and eyes were tinged with a hint of sharpness as he stood up and spoke in an extremely light tone. "Bai Tanxia, who do you think you are? I, Song Qinian, will fall in love with you. This afternoon at 2 o'clock, at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, there is no waiting time." It wasn't until Song Qinian's figure disappeared that Bai Tanxia relaxed completely. His back was wet with sweat, and he weakly supported the table. The white and delicate hands tightly clasped against the corner of the table, and the delicate veins on the back of the slender hands slightly highlighted, giving off a fragile beauty. The girl has gentle black long hair, delicately draped on both sides, with a pearl hairpin pinned on one side. Her beautiful and delicate features make her lips pale at the moment. She is wearing a white plain skirt, petite and obedient, perfectly resembling the white moonlight in every boy's heart. She is a delicate and gentle wife. She stubbornly bit her own lip, which turned 2 tinges of blush. Married to him for 3 years, he has only returned home a few times in these 3 years. He has been lingering in various places and settling down outside for years. Even on his wedding night, he didn't stay at home for more than half an hour. The next day, the whole country knew that Song Qinian was still staying up at night on his wedding night, drinking and going to bars. There are many people behind her, both openly and secretly, gossiping and making jokes about her. Her role as a wife was to handle all kinds of gossip for him. Song Qinian's wife was a joke, and it was already well known. Recently, I have heard that his white moonlight has returned, and the two of them are stuck together every day, without distinguishing each other. Even being filmed and reported, the story couldn't be written for 3 days and 3 nights. Since that's the case, Bai Tanxia is not a persistent person, she can just leave. Back then, she fell in love with Song Qinian without hesitation, and finally seized the opportunity to become his wife. How could she give up? So without hesitation, he restrained his temper and began to learn to be a good wife. But what's the use? He hasn't been moved for the past 3 years. There is always only one person who can make him fall in love, Ning Qingzi. Song Qinian got into the car and turned on his computer to work, but the sound of typing on the keyboard didn't make much noise, so he slammed the computer shut. What exactly is Bai Tanxia going crazy this early morning? The assistant looked at Song Qinian's face through the rearview mirror and tentatively said, "Steward Wang said that Madam saw news about you last night." Song Qinian couldn't help but say, "I've had a lot of news." "Which financial channel isn't my news?" Assistant. "It's about your entertainment news, about you and Miss Ning. I heard that Madam watched it all night last night. It can be seen from this that he has had scandals with so many women that he can let Bai Tanxia watch it all night." Upon hearing these words, Song Qinian's face suddenly improved, so she was jealous before proposing a divorce. Although Song Qinian didn't care about Bai Tanxia, she was jealous of herself, which satisfied his self-esteem as a man. To be fair, Song Qinian currently does not want to divorce Bai Tanxia. From the perspective of his wife, Bai Tanxia is definitely the best choice. She is not clingy, considerate, and gentle, and manages the family in an orderly manner. It seems that she doesn't really want to divorce herself either. Then I'll give her a step down and let her play tricks. However, as soon as I arrived at the company, the secretary entered the office with something to report the news. "Mr. Song, this is the divorce agreement sent by Madam." Madam said please confirm and sign it. Song Qinian's relieved mood was once again ignited, and he grabbed the piece of paper, tore it apart, and threw it out. "Get out of here." Song Qinian gritted his teeth and the corners of his eyes were stained with a 3-pointed red. "Bai Tanxia, you look great." The secretary was trembling with fear, but still had the courage to retrieve a divorce agreement and place it on the desk. "Madam guessed that you might be in a bad mood, so she asked me to print an extra copy in advance. Mr. Song, please take your time to read." After speaking, the secretary quickly fled the scene, as if there were dogs chasing after him. On the white A4 paper on the desktop, there were 4 big characters written in black and white on the divorce agreement, which made Song Qinian find it very eye-catching. It seems that there was a premeditation, and the divorce agreement was already prepared so quickly. He wants to see how much appetite this woman really has. Song Qinian opened the divorce agreement and carefully read the regulations inside. 1. Song Qinian wants to give Bai Tan a summer tax of 80 million yuan as compensation for feeding dogs during my 3 years of youth. 2. After divorce, weddings, funerals, and weddings have nothing to do with each other. Even if we meet, we should treat each other as strangers. There are only 2 clauses written on the divorce agreement, they are clean and tidy. The long stack behind her was because she was afraid that Song Qilian would not give her money, so she listed in detail what kind of things had caused her harm in the past 3 years, and how much compensation should be made. In the end, the total amount was 80 million yuan. Song Qinian looked at the extent to which the city would turn pale. What kind of broken treaty are these? Why doesn't she go grab 80 million? What does the second point mean? Are you still afraid of pestering her after getting divorced? Song Qinian was furious and covered his chest. Looking at the two words, divorce, on the divorce agreement, Song Qinian felt like he was occasionally pricked with a needle, not very painful or uncomfortable. But he kept reminding him that there always seemed to be some discomfort in his body. After lunch, Bai Tanxia cleaned the house spotlessly and folded the last piece of Song Qinian's clothes before she could leave with peace of mind. In this way, I am free from worries. However, to leave the place where she had lived for 3 years, and to gradually pull the man who had been in her heart for 5 years away from her own bone marrow, this pain made it almost difficult for her to breathe. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Accidental Amnesia. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Accidental Amnesia. Bai Tanxia was curled up on the ground in pain, and the butler Wang searched for a while before finding her. He quickly helped her up. Madam, what's wrong with you? Where are you feeling unwell? Is it serious? Do you need me to call a family doctor or call 120? Bai Tanxia had accumulated some strength and was finally able to stand firm. She dared not look back at Song Qinian's room for fear of not letting go. Struggling away from that room. A weak voice said weakly, I'm fine, it's just a little low blood sugar. I won't be at home anymore. You need to take care of Song Qinian more. I put his favorite clothes in the cabinet on the left side, and the matching suit is also hanging in the wardrobe. I have already allocated the tie and cuffs for the same series, marked them, and you can just take them. Madam, why did you suddenly say that? Housekeeper Wang felt a little uneasy upon hearing this. It's okay, just remember it. Bai Tanxia took a deep look at the courtyard behind her, trying to engrave it in her mind. Bai Tanxia took a taxi to the Civil Affairs Bureau. On the other side of the company, Song Qinian finally finished his work and took a moment to catch his breath. Qi Nian has worked hard. You haven't had lunch yet, have you? I made fish soup for you, which is the most gentle and stomach nourishing. You must like it. Come and try it now. Ning Qingzi casually entered and exited Song Qinian's office, carrying an insulated box without even knocking on the door. Then I'll have a good taste of your craft, Song Qinian said as he looked at the beautiful woman in front of him, as if all the exhaustion of the morning had been swept away. After the insulation box was opened, Song Qinian first smelled a fresh and fragrant smell, followed by the fishy smell of fish. He endured discomfort and took his first sip of fish soup in Ning Qingzi's hopeful eyes. It's so fishy. In fact, Song Qinian did not like to eat fish. He could not accept the fishy smell of fish at all. He suddenly remembered that in the past 3 years, Bai Tanxia had many people send him food, but it seemed like there was not a single fishy smell. You had a drink last night, which I made specifically for you to nourish your stomach. This is my first time cooking. Ning Qingzi said as she sorted out the bag containing a thermos box, revealing the scar on her wrist. Song Qinian nervously approached and grasped it. How did this happen? Ning Qingzi withdrew her hand and hid it behind her, with a delicate little face full of anxiety. This is my first time cooking for someone, I'm not proficient, so. Upon hearing this, Song Qinian didn't care about whether it was fishy or not. He painfully placed Ning Qingzi's hand in his arms and gently caressed her wound before finally giving her a kiss. Don't do this kind of thing for me again in the future, just leave it to the chef to do. Your hands are playing the piano, so you can't get hurt by these things. Even though he felt it was fishy, Song Qinian still drank all the fish soup brought by Ning Qingzi. But today, Song Qinian always feels like he has lost something important, and his whole body feels a bit uncomfortable. Ning Qingzi pulled up a stool and sat next to Song Qinian. I heard. Bai Tanxia seems to bring you lunch every day, why didn't you see it today? After Ning Qingzi's reminder, Song Qinian finally realized where he felt uncomfortable. It turned out that Bai Tanxia didn't bring herself any food today. In the past, Bai Tanxia would prepare a soup every time she brought food. In addition, he always makes various kinds of soup for him, among which his favorite is the soup in the fermented glutinous rice dumpling. Moderate sourness and sweetness, with just the right amount of heat. Thinking of this, he glanced at the time and realized it was already 1 o'clock. I made an appointment to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau at 2 o'clock. He threw all the documents aside and said impatiently, "She won't come again. I'll divorce her today." Ning Qingzi covered her mouth in surprise and said, "Ah. Divorce. Why do you suddenly feel like you're getting divorced? Maybe it's because she misunderstood me, right?" Song Qinian held Ning Qingzi's hand and comforted, "Don't worry, it's none of your business. It's just Bai Tanxia taking a breath on her own." Thinking of the divorce agreement this morning makes Song Qinian feel a bit annoyed and his brain hurts. Since she has already planned to divorce, then leave. Considering the time, Song Qinian got up and put on his coat, holding Ning Qingzi's face with one hand. He gently said, "I arranged for her to divorce, so I'll go first. You'll wait for me at the company when I come back. If you're bored, let your secretary take you to stroll around or take a look at the neighboring mall. I'll take care of everything you like." "Oh, Qi Nian, you're here again." Ning Qingzi rubbed his hand coquettishly. The smile on Ning Qingzi's face suddenly disappeared when Song Qinian stepped out of the office. As for Bai Tanxia, she is just a substitute brought in by Song Qinian. Now that she has returned, Bai Tanxia should obediently make way for her. It would be wise to give up Mrs. Song's position as soon as possible. As for Song Qinian, she is determined to win. Song Qinian sat in the car and headed straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. He felt a little discomfort in his heart, which was attributed to being angered by Bai Tanxia in the morning. Suddenly, Song Qinian's phone rang and he saw a stranger's phone. Without hesitation, Song Qinian hung up. But the phone was called persistently 3 times, and the 3rd time Song Qinian impatiently answered it. "Excuse me, is this Ms. Bai Tanxia's husband? We are the First People's Hospital, and your wife has had a car accident. Please come over as soon as possible." Song Qinian propped up his head, rubbed his temples, and said, "Go to the First People's Hospital." Surprisingly, there was a car accident at this time. I really don't even stand on the side of Bai Tanxia. After arriving at the hospital, Bai Tanxia had already come out of the emergency room and moved into a regular ward. Looking at the girl lying on the hospital bed with a pale and weak face, as fragile as a thin piece of paper, with layers of gauze wrapped around her head, it looked like she was seriously injured. Why is she so unlucky? However, she seems to have lost a lot of weight. Is it because the family cheated on her food? Song Qinian rarely sees Bai Tanxia, and their communication on weekdays is either through an assistant or through the phone. Even this morning's argument was rushed. Song Qinian's impression of Bai Tanxia is still 3 years ago. She is really thin and weak now, as if she would collapse when the wind blows. 2 hours later, Bai Tanxia woke up and looked at everything unfamiliar in front of her. There were a few strangers by her bedside, and she timidly curled up her body. Who were these people? Don't pretend to be dead when you wake up, get up quickly. What kind of trick are you doing? You acted in a car accident just to avoid getting divorced. You really put in a lot of effort. Bai Tanxia couldn't understand what this handsome man was saying. She just felt his tone was a bit fierce, and instinctively curled herself tighter. Song Qinian looked at her like this and felt restless. "Go and call the doctor," he said. The doctor arrived soon, and after a thorough examination of Bai Tanxia, the result was finally confirmed. "Mr. Song, your wife currently has a blood clot in her brain. As long as she takes care of it for a while and it dissipates on its own, it will be fine. However, due to the impact of this blood clot, your wife's current situation is not very good. She may be mentally stuck at the age of a child." "What are you saying?" Song Qinian raised his voice incredulously. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Love Couples. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Love Couples. Bai Tanxia hid her lower half of her face under the blanket, leaving only a pair of eyes to bolt around and look at the outside world. Her gaze was more focused on the man talking to the doctor at the door. He looks good, although he speaks with a fierce expression. Her eyes are still unconsciously drawn to him. The hand under the blanket quietly covered her chest, jumping so fast. Is she sick? The nurse who was infusing Bai Tanxia saw that Bai Tanxia's gaze had been fixed on Song Qinian's body, and she smiled and said, "You are really good at picking on your husband. He looks so handsome, no wonder you love to look at him so much." Husband. Bai Tanxia's eyes were blank as she pondered and tilted her head. A strand of hair still curled up above her head, and her lips pondered these two words repeatedly. What is husband? Your husband is your family, someone who will love, care for, treat you well, and always support you throughout your life. I think your husband must love you very much. He was always by your side when you didn't wake up. Bai Tanxia was thinking seriously, but her mind was still empty with nothing. She subconsciously asked, "Does he love me very much?" The nurse placed liquid on her toes and smiled, "Yes, if he didn't love you very much, how could you marry him? You must be a very loving couple, carrying your marriage certificate with you and never separating. It was only from your marriage certificate that I saw your husband that I contacted him." Upon hearing this, Bai Tanxia showed a smile. Beneath her thin bangs were curved eyes, causing small dimples to appear on both sides of her mouth. She was both cute and beautiful, incredibly sweet. So he likes himself so much. The most handsome man is actually his own husband. He must be very sad because he doesn't remember anything now. After finishing the conversation with Song Qinian, he came over with a cold face, and his eyebrows could even catch a fly. The nurse also finished and left, leaving only the two of them in the room. Qingyang Wan thought he was worried about his condition, that's why his face turned so pale. And even with this expression, he doesn't look ugly, and he's also very handsome. He was indeed the husband he chose. She reached out and tentatively grabbed his wrist. His big hand held in the palm of his hand was very warm, as if it was wrapped in a lot of marshmallows. She really likes this feeling. "Don't worry, husband, I will get better soon," Bai Tanxia said to him with a sweet smile and sparkling eyes. At that moment, Song Qinian's back was tense and his limbs were stiff. He looked at Bai Tanxia with incredulous eyes. She had been married for 3 years and had never called herself that before. Is she sick or crazy? But with it came a tingling sensation that filled Song Qinian's heart. She used to smile so beautifully. When she called her husband, her voice was soft and sweet, with a proud and delicate tone, accompanied by just the right amount of coquettishness. Song Qinian lowered his head to confirm whether Bai Tanxia was pretending or not from her face. The handsome face within reach made Bai Tanxia blush uncontrollably. She instinctively wanted to leave a good impression on Song Qinian, so she sat very upright with her brown eyes moist and well-behaved. But now that the distance is so close, what does he want to do? Bai Tanxia was afraid that he wouldn't like her current self and wanted to please him. She was so timid that her fingers had already been pinched together. She suddenly mustered up the courage to step forward. Suck, loud voice kissed Song Qinian's cheek and lips. With the sweet fragrance on the girl's body in a slightly cool and moist touch, Song Qinian froze in place. He felt as if his cheeks had been burned, and the unfamiliar touch still carried a sense of wetness. Soft and tender like a piece of jelly. The girl seemed to feel no discomfort or abnormality from him at all, trembling her hands and bravely hugging his neck. Her childlike voice coquettishly comforted him, saying, "I will get better soon, and then go home with my husband. I won't cause any trouble for him." Song Qinian curled up his fingers and didn't hug her. At this moment, he has already been scorched by thunder and tender inside. She just lost her mind, how could she become a different person? Junyi's face was filled with disbelief and astonishment. It's just amnesia, why did she become a clingy little whiny? You should take good care of yourself in the hospital first, I still have to go back to the company. Song Qinian lowered his voice. I originally wanted to take her hand off, but no matter how I tried, I couldn't take it off. She stubbornly held on to Song Qinian and refused to let go. Bai Tanxia didn't know where she didn't do well, but when she heard his voice, she felt that he was just unhappy. She had a straight face and had to leave. She messed up and didn't leave a good impression on him. Will he never like him again in the future? The little girl's delicate eyes instantly turned red, her delicate eyebrows wrinkled pitifully, and she bit her lips pitifully and lost. Her nose was red, and tears were swirling in her eyes. Don't. She tightly held on to Song Qinian and stuffed herself into his arms, afraid that Song Qinian wouldn't want her anymore. Husband, don't leave me alone in the hospital, I'm afraid. Song Qinian said coldly, I will have someone take care of you. Who knew that Bai Tanxia shook her head like a tambourine, and she stubbornly refused to let go. If she lets go of her hand, she'll leave. Maybe she won't come back again in the future. She shouldn't let go. No, no, I want to be with my husband. Husband, don't leave me alone, okay? I know I'm not doing well now, I'll try my best to become better. Please don't leave me behind. Bai Tanxia had just woken up and only had contact with Song Qinian. For Bai Tanxia, Song Qinian was her entire being. The little girl was delicate, with a soft body that could turn red for a long time even with a slight pinch of force. Song Qinian looked at the red marks he had made, which was somewhat shocking and difficult to use tough measures. She must have been frightened when she had a car accident before. Little Pearl also came at once, with large tears hanging on her lower eyelashes. Coupled with her light brown and ethereal deer eyes, and her pitiful gaze, Song Qinian couldn't refuse. His tone was a bit stiff, I'm not leaving, I'll be working remotely at the hospital. Can you let me go now? The little girl's pouted lips finally let go and slowly let go of him. When he released it, he was still probing bit by bit, as if he would run away in the blink of an eye. Because Bai Tanxia's movements were too large, the liquid on her hands no longer dripped normally, and she also regained blood. Song Qinian called a doctor for her by hand. See if you dare to move around again next time. Song Qinian's tone was clearly fierce, but Bai Tanxia was not afraid of him at all. She couldn't move her hands, so she reached out her face and rubbed it against his as if to please him. He was a little scumbag and pricked her. Song Qinian looked at his furry head with a soft touch on his face, rubbing against his chin like a kitten. It's both fragrant and soft. I never noticed before that she was so delicate and clingy, just like to stick to people's bodies. Bai Tanxia's voice was already very soft and delicate. At this time, in order to please Song Qinian, she even softened her voice. A pair of curved water eyes seemed to be piled up with stars. Husband, don't be angry, Xia Xia will listen to her husband very much. Xia Xia listens to her husband the most, she said sweetly in her hoarse voice. Song Qinian was almost lost in the hustle and bustle of his husband, but fortunately a nurse came in to rescue him. When the nurse re-injected him, Song Qinian had intended to take this opportunity to leave by the bedside, next to Bai Tanxia. Who knew that Bai Tanxia grabbed his sleeve with the other hand, and her pure and innocent eyes looked at him with a damp look, with tears still hanging from the corners of her eyes. It seems like as long as he dares to leave, she will cry and show him. After struggling for a while, Song Qinian finally chose to give up. He was arguing with a woman with a child's intelligence. Time passed bit by bit, and Ning Qingzi was bored waiting in Song Qinian's office. She lifted her slender wrist to see that it was already 3 o'clock. They made an appointment to divorce at 2 o'clock, so they should have come back at 3 o'clock anyway. She sat in Song Qinian's seat and called him. What's wrong with Qingzi? Song Qinian leaned sideways and struggled to answer the phone. Since he decided to work remotely here, Bai Tanxia has had to stick to him, even holding him while he was working, making it difficult for him to move. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Why do we sleep in separate beds? You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 5. Little Cry Bag. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Little Cry Bag. Your room is not there, you. Song Qinian followed behind. Before she could finish speaking, I saw her fall straight onto my own bed and sleep with her eyes closed. The little girl slept on his 2-meter bed, like a doll she had bought, petite and cute, without occupying much space. Song Qinian comforted himself in his heart, calculated and let her go, just lie down for a while. Maybe she'll be fine when she wakes up. Hearing the clamor coming from below, Song Qinian closed the door and went out to check. In no time, Song Qinian came down from upstairs and saw Ning Qingzi standing tall and graceful in the living room. He was a bit puzzled as to why she had come. Steward Wang, you go down. Yes, sir. Steward Wang obediently continued, but the look in Ning Qingzi's eyes before leaving couldn't be said to be very good. Miss Ning and her old lady are very clear about this. I was entangled with my husband back then, but now he already has a wife and comes knocking on his door. I'm really shameless, just looking at the way the gentleman looks I'm afraid I still have feelings for her. Just pitiful madam, now her head is broken and her injuries are unclear, and she is unconscious. Qi Nian, don't blame me for coming to you on my own. It's just that you just divorced today. I'm afraid you might not be in a good mood, so I want to accompany you. If you're really feeling unwell, I can drink and talk with you. Ning Qingzi's cold and serene voice was mixed with a faint warmth. No need, I haven't divorced yet. Thinking of his experience today, Song Qinian felt that he had never been so tired when fighting for power. And he doesn't have any feelings for Bai Tanxia, how could he feel sad after divorce? Not divorced. Ning Qingzi's cold voice couldn't help but increase by a few decibels. They haven't divorced yet. So what did they go down for today? This matter is a long story. Song Qinian didn't even want to talk about what happened today. A bang came from upstairs, followed by the sound of something hitting the floor, followed by the gentle and intermittent cries of a delicate girl. Song Qinian twitched the corner of his mouth. You sit down first, I'll go up and see her. It goes without saying who she is. Where can Ning Qingzi sit? She wants to go up and see what kind of means Bai Tanxia has used. She has gone to the Civil Affairs Bureau and has not even divorced. I'll go with you too, maybe I can still help. Upon thinking about it, Song Qinian nodded and asked her to follow him upstairs. Song Qinian opened the door and saw a little girl sitting on the ground, curled up in a ball and crying to tears. Her tearful eyes were filled with fear and panic. As soon as Bai Tanxia saw him, she pounced on him, wishing to merge herself with him. Where did you go, husband? I thought my husband didn't want me anymore. Husband, I'm so scared. I just fell down, my legs hurt so much, my husband hurts. I want my husband to blow on me. The little girl's voice was both delicate and gentle, with a final note when speaking. Every sentence seemed to be coquettish, and it felt like she was twisting and twisting in her ears. Ning Qingzi saw Bai Tanxia hugging Song Qinian as if there was no one around, and she was so angry that she bit her lip. How did this white sandalwood summer become so delicate, like a fox spirit? Watched by Ning Qingzi, Song Qinian naturally had to pay attention to some propriety and did not follow Bai Tanxia's words. He wanted to help Bai Tanxia up, but she just didn't move. Bai Tanxia saw that he didn't blow on her, and the light in her eyes immediately dimmed. Her small eyes were filled with grievances, and she pouted slightly. She restrained herself from crying, but tears still hung on her eyelashes, making her feel pitiful. A soft voice with an imperceptible sense of loss said, legs have softened, I can't get up. Continuing this stalemate is not a solution. Song Qinian had no choice but to bravely lift the person up for the princess. Place her on the edge of the bed, pick up her pants, and you'll see a red patch on her knee. Ning Qingzi watched Song Qinian's indulgence towards Bai Tanxia and her caution, with a stiff smile on her face and her back teeth almost crushed. Previously, Song Qinian did not have this attitude towards Bai Tanxia. I don't know what kind of martial arts Bai Tanxia had used. This half-day's effort actually made Song Qinian look like this. Ning Qingzi pretended to be calm and said, Xia Xia is really delicate. With a light fall, she fell like this. Last time I fell from upstairs, I didn't fall like this. Upon hearing her words, Song Qinian's first reaction was that Bai Tanxia deliberately did it, otherwise it would just be a fall from the bed to the bottom. How could it be like this? But Song Qinian thought of this afternoon again, he just lightly grabbed her and she turned red. It's enough to see that Bai Tanxia's skin is like this, it turns red when touched, not intentionally made. He said, she's a bit delicate. Ning Qingzi was filled with depression in her heart, which meant that Bai Tanxia was even more delicate than her. Seeing that Song Qinian had already taken out the medicine box, Ning Qingzi rolled up her long sleeves and took the initiative to approach, thoughtfully saying, let me come, after all, there are differences between men and women, and it's more convenient for girls. And aren't you going to divorce soon? If her next boyfriend finds out, it might not be good. Song Qinian had a strange feeling in his heart, what is her next boyfriend? Ning Qingzi wanted to help, but Bai Tanxia stopped. She grabbed the clothes on Song Qinian's shoulder and quickly crawled into his arms. He kept crying and shouting, I don't want it, I don't want it, I want a husband. With this shout, the little girl saw all the crystal-clear tears hanging on her eyelashes rolling down, and her collagen-covered face was so smooth that even the tears couldn't stop. Ning Qingzi still wanted to forcefully take action. She held on to Bai Tanxia's kicking feet and tried to reason, let me help you apply medicine. He's a man, and his hands and feet are heavy. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. No, I don't, I want my husband, you're a bad person, I don't want you. Her eyes were even bloodshot with tears, and she looked as if she wanted to cry and break her intestines. Despite feeling very aggrieved, she still held back her crying voice. She was all petite and tearful, asking, husband, don't you hurt Xia Xia anymore? Seeing the gradually painful expression on Bai Tanxia's face, it was obvious that Ning Qingzi had touched her wound. The gauze on her head had not yet been removed, and the shaking was particularly severe at this moment, which shocked Song Qinian. If this fool doesn't stop, he will have to spend his whole life. He grabbed Ning Qingzi's hand and pushed it away. Qingzi, forget it. You can go down and rest. I'll leave this to you, he said. Ning Qingzi opened her mouth in disbelief, looking at Song Qinian and then at her own hands. Every time Song Qinian grabbed his hand, it was gentle and pitiful. Now, because of the white sandalwood summer, he actually used a considerable force to push her hand away. Song Qinian knelt on one knee in front of Bai Tanxia, grabbed her ankle, and began to slowly apply medicine to her. Ning Qingzi felt annoyed and quickly went downstairs, not seeing is clean. Bai Tanxia gradually stopped crying, her round pupils only filled with the man in front of her who was focused on drugging herself, and there was still a tear on her nose bridge that did not fall. When Song Qinian put away the cotton swab, he also brought tears from her nose bridge. His helpless voice was low and smooth. I didn't know before, Bai Tanxia. You're still a little crying bag, he said. Bai Tanxia tilted her head to look at her wound and then at her, giggling in disbelief, occasionally twitching her shoulders in a coquettish manner. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. She wants to snatch my watermelon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. She wants to snatch my watermelon. Ning Qingzi waited downstairs for a long time without seeing Song Qinian go downstairs, and the swaying movements of her toes became increasingly rapid. They haven't been working on anything for a long time, so there shouldn't be any special development. I don't know what methods Bai Tanxia used. She suddenly breathed a sigh of hatred in her heart. No, I absolutely cannot sit idly by and do nothing. As soon as Ning Qingzi got up, Butler Wang came over with a fruit platter and said to her with great discretion, "Miss Ning, the upstairs is Mr. S room, so it's not convenient for Miss Ning to enter. It's better to ask Miss Ning to have some fruit here and wait for a moment. Mr. and Mrs. will soon come down." She gritted the words Mr. and Mrs. tightly, hoping to make Ning Qingzi understand the difficulties and retreat. Ning Qingzi could only sit down with resentment, and her gaze at Steward Wang was also not good. With hatred and anger. The first thing she will do when she becomes the mistress of this family in the future is to dismiss that old lady. After a while, Song Qinian and Bai Tanxia finally came downstairs. Song Qinian changed into a black pajama, and his whole body was handsome, with a hint of sharpness and gentleness from the outside. He stood on the hallway, every frame resembling a poster blockbuster. And behind him was a girl who curled up her head behind Song Qinian, as if afraid of meeting people. She pulled Song Qinian's sleeve and hid behind her, timidly following him downstairs. Song Qinian sat on the main seat of the sofa, and naturally Bai Tanxia also sat over. She bit her lips slightly, her timid eyes wary as she looked at Ning Qingzi, clinging tightly to Song Qinian. When Bai Tanxia withdrew her gaze, she glanced at the watermelon next to her and licked her own mouth. Song Qinian naturally didn't miss her little gaze, picked up the plate and handed it to her. "Let's eat. Don't stick to him so tightly after eating." Bai Tanxia was very gentle and only took a small piece of watermelon, took a bite, and only then did she lose a small pointed corner. Song Qinian thought that even a casual tap with his teeth would not only cause so much damage. No wonder Bai Tanxia is so thin, she turned out to be so hungry. Watching the interaction between the two of them, Ning Qingzi's eyebrows furrowed uncontrollably. This scene was so eye-catching that her front teeth were almost crushed. Song Qinian was never so careful with her before, and even handed a fruit platter to Bai Tanxia. How much enchanting potion did this white sandalwood summer infuse into Song Qilian to achieve such an effect? What's wrong with Xia Xia? I remember when I saw her before, she wasn't like this, right? Ning Qingzi couldn't wait to know what exactly happened this afternoon. Looking at the little girl who had been clinging to him all along, Song Qinian said with a slight headache, "This afternoon she had a car accident and her brain was damaged, which turned into this. What should we do about your divorce?" Ning Qingzi became nervous, not easily aware. "There's nothing I can do." Song Qinian also felt a headache and couldn't help but reach out to help his forehead. "I can't divorce her now when she's out of consciousness, can I? After all, Bai Tanxia has been her shield for so many years, so let's consider this as her last kindness to her. But if you don't divorce, how can you get married?" Ning Qingzi became a bit anxious and couldn't help but bite her lower lip, her anxious expression fleeting in her eyes. "If Song Qinian cannot divorce, then I cannot marry Song Qinian, and I will always be just a woman that Song Qinian takes care of outside. She is also shameless, Ning Qingzi. If she wants to do it, she needs to be Mrs. Song, and what's the point of taking care of her outside? It's okay, I'm not in a hurry to get married yet, and the doctor said her brain will recover soon, so it shouldn't take too long." Song Qinian watched Bai Tanxia swallow the watermelon in her mouth with his own eyes. He had originally planned to wipe it with paper, but to her surprise, Ning Qingzi's sharp voice frightened her. Bai Tanxia's hand instantly withdrew and grabbed his sleeve, wiping the juice of the watermelon onto his clothes. Song Qinian couldn't help but twitch twice at the corner of his mouth. "Isn't it quite bold when Bai Tanxia argued with him in the morning? Why did you suddenly become so timid? Like a little cat. He didn't want his clothes to become Bai Tanxia's handkerchief for wiping her mouth, so he stiffly drew a piece of paper and handed it to Bai Tanxia. Are you in a hurry to get married? Ning Qingzi quickly stood up and looked at Song Qinian sitting on the opposite sofa, feeling a sigh of frustration in her heart. Before going abroad, Song Qinian's greatest wish was to marry himself, and he couldn't wait for a day. Now Song Qinian actually told her not to worry. Does he know exactly what he is talking about? Ning Qingzi silently gritted her front teeth and looked at Bai Tanxia, who was holding Song Qinian's happiness and leaning on his shoulder to eat watermelon. There was a fleeting hatred in his eyes. Ultimately, it's because of Bai Tanxia, who didn't even have the qualifications to compete with her back then, but now has become a threat to her. It's really ironic. Ning Qingzi gradually tightened her thumb, tightly gripping her index finger. But it's just his own defeated general, Mrs. Song's position will eventually be his. In the past, when Bai Tanxia was still a normal person, she couldn't compete against herself, let alone this mentally incomplete Bai Tanxia now. Ning Qingzi leaned back, and Rui's slender fingers grasped Song Qinian's hand. She wore a gentle and soothing smile on her face and said, "It's okay with Qinian, I will always be by your side. Xia Xia's brain is injured and not working well now, and I will come and take care of her more." Song Qinian opened her mouth to speak, but Ning Qingzi's movements were faster. She immediately squatted over and crouched in front of Song Qinian, as if her whole body had fallen into Song Qinian's arms. Song Qinian's breath sprayed onto Ning Qingzi's hands, and with their current movements, it was somewhat ambiguous. Ning Qingzi shifted her gaze and her face also showed a blush. The backhand gently covered Song Qinian's mouth, preventing him from saying anything he refused. A pair of light-colored eyes sparkled with warmth. "Don't refuse me, okay? I also have selfish intentions because I want to have more opportunities to see you. Are you unwilling to agree to such a small request?" Ning Qingzi's wishful thinking is very good. As long as Song Qinian agrees, she can freely enter and exit the Song family in the future. Ning Qingzi's sudden move scared Bai Tanxia, and Bai Tanxia's watermelon fell onto the carpet. She grew up with a big mouth and a pair of watery, starlit eyes, looking at Ning Qingzi with a confused emotion. Bai Tanxia even involuntarily hugged the fruit plate on the table and stared at Ning Qingzi with caution. "Husband, is she going to grab my watermelon? Husband, can you let her go? Xia Xia is afraid. This is what my husband gave me, I don't want her to take it away," she said as Bai Tanxia pouted and a mist gradually formed in her eyes. Her innocent and ignorant appearance was the most touching. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Do you not have a husband yourself? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Do you not have a husband yourself? Subsequently, Bai Tanxia's delicate eyebrows furrowed slightly. Ning Qingzi had a premonition that she couldn't say anything good. Sure enough. I heard Bai Tanxia's coquettish voice coming in. Why is her husband in our house? Does she not even have her own husband? So she looks so pitiful, she shouldn't be trying to snatch Xia Xia's husband, right? But Xia Xia only has one husband. If she steals him, Xia Xia will have no husband anymore. In order to prevent her from snatching her husband, Bai Tanxia generously selected a piece of fruit from the fruit tray for Ning Qingzi and said, "You should eat it and go home quickly. I only have one husband, I can't give it to you." After speaking, the little girl yawned coquettishly and tears welled up in her eyes. "Husband, Xia Xia is so tired. How about we go to bed?" Looking at the little girl who was indeed very tired, even feeling drowsy, she rubbed her own eyes and blushed slightly. Song Qinian couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief in his heart, as this little ancestor was finally going to sleep. "Qingzi, why don't you go back today? We'll talk about the rest at the company." "Okay." Ning Qingzi knew that there was no point in continuing to entangle herself, so she could only give up on it. But she wouldn't just give up so easily. At the end of the day, Bai Tanxia is just an impeccable shield. She can't even get into Song Qinyan's company, but she's different. Not only can I enter, but I can also be with Song Qinyan at any time. And what Song Qinyan likes is a gentle, sensible, and courteous woman who is not the kind of person who clings to him like candy. Ning Qingzi felt much better at this thought, and then she walked steadily away from the Song family in her high heels. Watching Ning Qingzi finally leave, Manager Wang breathed a sigh of relief. Sure enough, Madam is still impressive. In just a few words, Ning Qingzi was infuriated and left. Song Qinyan took Bai Tanxia upstairs to sleep. Seeing that Bai Tanxia still had a strong opinion on the bed, he thought that she couldn't sleep well alone and even fell off the bed, so he had to take her back to his own room. Anyway, a 2-meter big bed, sleeping on one side doesn't affect anyone. Song Qinyan comforted himself and brought Bai Tanxia into the room. After tossing and turning all day, Bai Tanxia may have been really tired, so she fell asleep. When she fell asleep, the girl's sleeping appearance was warm and gentle, completely returning to the white sandalwood summer of the past 3 years. Her well-behaved and sensible appearance was enough to soothe people's hearts. Song Qinyan thought that Bai Tanxia could actually be considered a good wife, and she never had to worry about family matters. It's a pity that I don't like her, otherwise it would be nice to spend a lifetime with such a woman. Song Qinyan entered the bathroom, and while taking a shower, the water washed over his face. He reviewed everything that had happened to him today. Wrapped in a towel, he walked out of the bathroom and saw the little girl lying on the bed. His brow furrowed gently. If it weren't for the person lying in his bed now, he would really suspect that all of this is actually fake. Fortunately, the little girl's sleeping posture was still very good, lying motionless on the bed. She looked exactly what she looked like when she entered and what she looked like when she came out. Seeing her sleeping so sweetly, even Song Qinyan's drowsiness surged up. As soon as Song Qinyan lifted the blanket and lay on the bed, he felt a soft and warm little thing crawling towards him, hugging his waist and resting his head on his abdomen. At this moment, Song Qinyan feels a bit awkward leaning against the bedside position. Mainly, the position where Bai Tanxia is currently leaning makes it difficult for him to move around. He looked at the little girl whose cheeks were slightly flushed from sleeping and couldn't help but reach out to pinch her. Sometimes I really doubt if this little girl is pretending. Pinching it on Bai Tanxia's soft and tender face feels so good, very soft and comfortable like a cake. However, with such a gentle pinch, there was a mark, which made Song Qinyan feel as if he had found a new toy that was as interesting. Bai Tanxia seemed to be sleeping restlessly, especially after touching her back. Her delicate eyebrows furrowed slightly, and she changed her face to sleep. Finally, she found a decent position and slept comfortably. Bai Tanxia didn't know what she was holding, thinking it was just a little bare pillow. It was so warm and comfortable, but there was something on her face that was a bit hard. Song Qinyan waited for Bai Tanxia to fall asleep before taking action. He removed Bai Tanxia's head from his abdomen and instructed her to lie on the side and go to sleep. There seems to be a gap between two people. Song Qinyan breathed a sigh of relief and finally got it done. I can also sleep comfortably now. However, not long after, he felt a furry thing huddled next to him and resting on his arm. Song Qinyan opened his melancholic eyes, looked at his own arm, and first opened the blanket, revealing Bai Tanxia's face, just in time to see her face. Because she was curled up in the blanket and covered by it, she looked at her entire face, causing her face to turn red. In addition, her delicate little face fell into Song Qinyan's sight at this moment, forming a C arc, which looked very cute. Song Qinyan slept higher than Bai Tanxia, and the two of them shared the same bed. Naturally, the quilt would rise with the height of Song Qinyan's cover, which led to Bai Tanxia's entire face being covered. Song Qinyan lifted the blanket, reached out and rubbed his slightly painful temples, and finally covered the blanket under his armpit. In this way, it happened to cover Bai Tanxia's neck. This night, Bai Tanxia slept exceptionally sweet, but Song Qinyan didn't sleep well at all. The next day when he went to work, Song Qinian still had blood in his eyes and looked really tired. When Ning Qingzi entered the office and saw Song Qinian, he was sitting on the office chair taking a nap. This is the first time she has seen such a tired Song Qinian. So what exactly happened between them after I left last night? Ning Qingzi didn't dare to ask, but walked over and slowly pinched her temple for Song Qinian. Throughout the entire process, Song Qinian did not open his eyes because he knew that there was always only one person who could enter his office without knocking, and that was Ning Qingzi. And as soon as she arrived, she smelled the smell on her body. High-grade perfume, which is a combination of jasmine and rose. But for some reason, at this moment, Song Qinian suddenly remembered the sweet and fragrant taste on Bai Tanxia's body. That taste is not strong, but rather very pleasant, and it doesn't smell unpleasant. It's a very comfortable taste. So what perfume does sandalwood use? End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Xia Xia is an orphan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 9. Xia Xia gets lost. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 10. Police Station Leaders. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Police Station Leaders. Qingzi, I'm sorry, you can only eat by yourself. I have to go find her. She's not clear-headed now and has run away again. Song Qinian comforted Ning Qingzi and quickly left. His pace of departure carried a nervousness and urgency that he himself couldn't even conceal. Ning Qingzi looked at the back of Song Qinian as he left, her eyes full of emotion, and her gaze followed her all the way until Song Qinian's figure disappeared. At this moment, Ning Qingzi left a crescent mark on her index finger that she had pinched out herself. Song Qinian's current behavior really lacks any persuasiveness. Speaking of not caring about Bai Tanxia, but the body's reaction cannot deceive people. Song Qinian is clearly more focused on Bai Tanxia than before, which is not a good omen. We must nip this possibility before that. Bai Tanxia held the lunch box in place and sobbed softly, perhaps because she had cried for too long and her eyes turned red, like a pitiful little rabbit. Are you okay? Suddenly, a white handkerchief fell into Bai Tanxia's eyes, and she coaxed a pair of eyes as she looked up at her pitifully. Especially now she is still crouching on the ground like a big rabbit, soft and cute. That pair of eyes seemed to be filled with bright stars, so brilliant and dazzling, but unfortunately, there was still some mist in these beautiful big eyes, like dusty pearls. Surprisingly, it makes people want to explore further. The person handing her the handkerchief was a very young little brother. The little brother was wearing a pair of white headphones, his hair was slightly yellow, and there was a hint of gold in the sunlight. He had a soft smile on his face, and he looked like an angel with golden light all over his body. Bai Tanxia even forgot to cry and just stared blankly at the little brother in front of her. The boy saw Bai Tanxia staring at him, took off his earphones and casually hung them around his neck. His handsome face supported the delicate silk on his forehead, squatting in front of Bai Tanxia and reaching out to her. Do you need me to help you up? The voice of the youth was like a gust of fresh wind sweeping over the eardrums of Bai Tanxia. Bai Tanxia placed her hand on the other person's hand and was pulled up. This girl has been staying in place for a long time, but no one has come forward to help because some people think she is mentally abnormal, while others think this is a beginner's skill, so everyone is unwilling to lend a helping hand. Originally, Bai Jiu didn't want to meddle in anything, but he suddenly saw that the girl's profile looked a bit like his cousin, so he came forward to help. This girl is even more stunning and beautiful than she imagined. Even if she cries like this now, her appearance does not diminish her beauty at all. But at first glance, this girl's face looks even more like a cousin. But when I met my cousin, she was still very young. After so many years of not seeing her, I don't know what she looks like now. And my cousin will definitely not appear in these places. After all, my cousin is, I don't think you have anything to do, can you go home on your own? Because of this face that bears some resemblance to her cousin, Bai Yueguang's impression of Bai Tanxia has become even better. I got lost and couldn't find my way home. I wanted to find my husband, but I couldn't find his company. As soon as she said this, Bai Yueguang unexpectedly raised her eyebrows and eyes. This girl looks so young and even married, but her way of speaking doesn't seem like a normal person. It seems there's no other way, we can only do it this way. Bai Yueguang took the person to the police station and told the police in detail about her situation. The police have just started contacting them. Bai Yueguang reached out and touched Bai Tanxia's head. The girl was wearing a white soft woolen sweater, a pink pleated skirt on her lower body, carrying a small pink bag on her back, holding a large box in her hand and tied a high ponytail. She looked youthful and beautiful, as if she had just stepped out of college. When she spoke, she was like the clothes on her body, soft and likable, with clear foolishness in her eyes. Her clothes are all branded, so it seems like a little girl from somewhere has gone missing. Unfortunately, there seems to be a problem with the brain. The police have started notifying your family that someone will soon come to pick you up. I have something else to do, so I'll leave first. Bai Tanxia tightly gripped the food box in her hand, trying to grab onto the young man in front of her. However, she realized that this young man seemed to have nothing to do with her, and as someone with a husband, she couldn't easily grab onto others. Holding back the excessive fear in his heart, he turned to the other person and said in a mosquito-sized voice, "Thank you." The more Bai Yueguang looked at the little girl, the more adorable she felt. She was greeted with a face that looked so similar to her cousin and said thank you. It's really satisfying to say that. The police station suddenly quieted down, with only the sound of police footsteps coming and going. Bai Tanxia hugged herself in fear, becoming increasingly nervous and curling herself up tighter, biting her lower lip tightly, suppressing her inner fear. When Song Qinian arrived at the police station, there was more or less anger in his heart. Until now, if my brain is not normal, I shouldn't run around everywhere, which has caused everyone to look for her in a frenzy. Bai Tanxia's ears are very sharp. Whenever she hears someone coming, she will quietly glance at them. This time, seeing the figure of Song Qinian appear here, she rushed forward excitedly. I threw myself directly into Song Qinian's arms. As soon as Song Qinian fell into his arms, he began to quietly sob, as if he was about to cry out all the tears he had just suppressed. At the moment when Song Qinian saw Bai Tanxia, his face darkened. He was about to teach this girl who was running around, but she threw herself into her arms, buried her head in her neck, and sobbed softly. Her collar could feel full and round tears falling low into her collar. Being held tightly by Bai Tanxia, feeling the trembling sensation emanating from her, Song Qinian had so many words to scold that he could only get stuck in his throat. He stiffened his hands and patted her back, as if soothing in his eyes. Are you her family? The police saw the demeanor of the newcomer, dressed in a suit and leather shoes, and at first glance, it looked like a person with status, so they had to take another look and inquire. Yes, I'm her. Song Qinian's throat froze slightly, husband. The police saw Bai Tanxia pouncing on him, and this intimacy didn't seem to be fake. Is your wife a bit uncomfortable? The police officer pointed to his own brain. Yes, I'm causing trouble for you. Song Qinian hugged Bai Tanxia and couldn't do anything now. Although I wanted to peel off Bai Tanxia, it was obvious that I couldn't do it. It was like carrying a koala on his body. Since that's the case, we should take good care of her. It's so dangerous to leave her alone. Don't do this again next time. The police didn't say anything, it's just a pity. Such a beautiful little girl, why is her brain not very good? End of this chapter.